Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar today, where we answer the question, are you all set for your golden years? So today we have Sean, our Senior Unit Trust Analyst at IFAS Singapore. He will share about how you can maximize your CPF to reach your retirement goals, as well as some key considerations for your financial planning. He will also be touching on some tools on FSMOne, which you can utilize to aid your financial planning process. So without further ado, I'll now pass the time to Sean.
All right. Thank you, Sarah, for the introduction. So, hello everyone. My name is Sean. I work with the Unit Trust research team at iFast. And as some of you may actually remember, or if you go onto the website, you will see my name sometimes as I put out articles on Unit Trust. And today, I'll be sharing with you about why you should actually think about starting to invest your CPF if you have not. And if you have, that's good, because we also have some resources, education resources that we have on our new microsite that we want to share with all of you, so that so you can keep up with what's going on in the CPF scene, and also as well as some of the unit trusts that's actually available for CPF investment. So to start things off with this presentation, I'll just share with you the outline of what we're going through for this webinar. Firstly, I think we are just going to start with introducing why you should start investing your CPF money if you haven't started. And also, I think with what has been going on in markets these days with the COVID-19 situation, I think a lot of investors are feeling quite jittery with regards to whether they should invest now or later. So of course, then naturally we'll be going through some scenarios of various timelines across the Great Depression, the World War II, the oil crisis, and we go through scenarios as to what if you actually invested during those periods. And after that, we also go through some like the introduction to our microsite is brand new, and we are very excited to share with you some of the tools, products, actually insights that we have lined up for all of you moving forward from now. And we also teach you about like how you can actually make the best of the microsite for your CPF investments. And at the same time, we will always reiterate, like for when it comes to CPF investments, you need to diversify, because you're in this for the long term, and diversification is the only way that you can ensure that you will be that your CPF investment portfolio will be able to survive for the long term. And last but not least, we will share with you some reasons why you should actually invest with us. So I think to start things off, to frame the reason why you should actually invest in CPF, firstly, I think historically markets have actually shown that if you invested your money over long horizons, you definitely tend to benefit. So of course, when it comes to investing, I think it's quite clear that there's bound to be wins and losses. If you look at the table over there, like the red highlights symbolizes losses during those periods for each asset class, which is broken down into your World MSCI AC World Equity Index, your Bloomberg Aggregate Bond Index, which is global bonds, and also your balanced portfolio of 60 equities and 40% bonds. So I think if you look at the chart over there, equities definitely have underperformed more times than for example, your bonds or your balanced portfolio. But the idea about investing in long term, it basically is to accumulate more wins than losses, right? So when you look at when you look at the table over here, equity markets, they tend to equity markets and balanced portfolio over the long term, they outperform about 70% of the time. And this is over a 30-year period. And for bonds, they outperform the CPF OA rate 80% of the time. So this is actually quite clear as to how, when it comes to investing, you need to stay for the long term, because if not, you run the risk of making a loss over a 5-year period, 10-year period, if let's say things really turn south from here onwards. And I think if you look at the annualized returns for equity, for bonds, for balanced portfolios, you can see that they range about 6%, as compared to your CPF OA rate from the 1990s to right now, it's about 2.8% per annum. I think the CPF OA rate hasn't been changed for a decade or more. And so I think when we look at CPF investments, we need to make some assumptions, because when we try to project how much will you get by at the end of 30 years, for example, we need to do some simple assumptions about yourself, right? So so these are some of the assumptions that we actually laid out in our projections for what you could potentially get. So firstly, you have about 30 years before your retirement, because I'll just make a simple assumption that all of you still have quite a bit of years down the road, and that perhaps you're a fresh grad, right? You start, this is your first time investing, and that you'll start with $3,000 per month in salary, and that your salary is expected to grow at 5% per annum up till you retire. And we also assume that you want to seek to maximize your CPF returns, and also your contribution limit. So up to a point where you, for your CPF contribution, it will actually it will actually top at the current CPF contribution ceiling of 37,000, and that you also wholly rely on the CPF money. But of course, because of the complexity of how CPF calculates their returns, we will not be taking into account all those special interest rates that they provide to you. So let's just see how these simple assumptions translate into potential returns out there. So like I mentioned, the chart on the right basically describes the analyzed returns for each asset class, and of course the CPF rate. And as you can see, at the table over here, you will be better off in the long term if you actually invested in equities. But the problem is there's a lot of volatility involved on your way if you actually held on to 30 years, right? And if you compare it to bonds, it would generally be more stable. But the thing is, of course, the potential returns are lesser, and that's because equity is a more risky investment or asset class compared to your bonds. And actually, if you combine with equity and bonds, which is your balanced portfolio, you get somewhere in between. So the table illustrates that over a 30-year period from 1989 to 2019, you'll be better off in putting your money into the financial markets as opposed to just leaving it in your CPF OA account. So this is the visual representation of the table that we saw later, that we saw just in the previous slide. So over the 30 years, we estimate that you will actually have invested about 942,000 into your CPF OA account, and this is assuming that you actually invest all of your CPF contributions from yourself and your employer, and that you are able to be employed over this course of 30 years. Of course, this is not like a totally realistic representation, but this is just to give you an idea of how much your CPF investments could actually bring you years down the road. So the dotted line actually on the that you can see is actually when you actually hit the $1 million mark, right? So for your bond portfolio, what's very interesting is that if your bonds portfolio, you hit the $1 million mark first, which is just right before 2011, followed by your balanced portfolio, your equity portfolio, then your CPF portfolio, which is about 4 to 5 years later. So the thing is, actually, if you look at the trajectory of all these investment portfolio values, right, things only start to make a difference actually 10 to 20 years down the road. You know, otherwise they're all pretty much neck to neck in terms of which is better or worse. And equity investments really put off right around 2011, 2012, when things actually, if you look at the blue line, it actually move in quite a parabolic fashion. So the idea is actually the thing about equities is that you really need time in the market in order to actually reap the benefits of having such returns in the markets. And I think it's quite clear that equity is a more risky investment asset class. So obviously, you have to take into account your own investment risk profile, your preference, and stuff like that, which I'll share with you later on. But I think when it comes to risks, it comes from ourselves, right? Because when we invest, we always try to retail investors, we tend to have that herd behavior. We tend to buy at the highs and sell at the lows. So that is not a way to make money. So actually, I think when it comes to investments, when it comes to our own investments, our biggest risk actually comes from ourselves. We overthink our portfolios. We try to market time because we think we can beat the market, or that actually we start to take on more risks because we think that I'm 40, 50 years old now and I need this amount to reach my retirement goal, and that I've missed out on so many years of my younger years to actually start investing, and therefore I'll take more risk. Actually, that is a risk by itself to your investment portfolio. Or that if you believe that your portfolio returns should match a particular index like the STI or S&P 500 index, or any particular asset class, but the truth is your portfolio returns should match your own risk profile and not like a equity benchmark or anything like that. And I think what like the real advantage that CPF investment actually brings to us is that it's something that we will never be able to touch for a long time. So it's something that it's out of sight, out of mind, and that I think if you actually have a regular savings plan, it forces you to sit through volatility and stay invested throughout. And that, of course, as long as you stay employed, your monthly inflow into your CPF always allows you to make actually regular contributions. And that is actually the key to investment success, which I will actually touch on later. So I think we have come to the part where we try to go through various scenarios, like what if right now, what if the February top was the market top, right? What if I invested in the top? What would happen to my portfolios down the road? How long will I get to break even? Does it mean that I shouldn't invest at all? So I think no one knows, right? But I think we can go back to history as it can offer us some clues. And I think the biggest market the biggest market drops that has ever occurred was basically the Great Depression and possibly the World War II as well. So the Great Depression happened in the late 1920s. And during this period, I think investors actually experienced about 80 to 90% in drawdowns over the Great Depression. And I think and if you actually did a lump sum investment, it would have taken you about 25 years to break even. And in World War II, you will actually experience about 60% in drawdowns, and it will take you 9 years to break even. So, but the thing is, back then you could only invest like in lump sum terms. You did not have things like a regular savings plan that right now I think we all have the luxury of, where it just automatically deducts from your bank account every month. So if, let's say, a regular savings plan was a possibility back then, where it deducts $100 from your bank account every day, the truth is your investment portfolio maximum drawdown will only be about 67%. While that's not a small amount, but it's actually much better than a lump sum investment. And the most important thing, I think it helps with us psychologically, is that it only takes us 13 months to break even from its maximum drawdown in by May 1932, right? So it only takes you 13 months to break even from however much you actually put into your portfolios, and that's when you actually don't lose any money. And for World War II, it's about 7 months, right? And if you contrast it with a lump sum investment, it's about 20 years for lump sum investment during the Great Depression and 9 years for World War II. So RSP strategy can really help us psychologically when it comes to things like this. Right now, we will go through with some more recent events. For example, during the oil crisis back in the 1970s, we saw a maximum drawdown of 46%. Lump sum investment, it would take you 91 months to recover. And with a RSP strategy, the S&P 500, you would have only taken about 40 months. And for the GFC, likewise, we saw a 50% drawdown. you will only take about 25 months with RSP strategy to break even. And I think you would have actually made a lot of money if you actually did that through the GFC period. So the key is RSP, like investing your CPF money is really useful because you don't see it, and that you get to do a monthly RSP regardless. And this can actually help you tide through any volatility that may happen now or in the future. And I think when markets go down, you actually acquire more units at a lower price. And when markets go up, you acquire units at lesser units at a higher price. So it actually helps to even out your break-even cost. So I think what we advocate for your CPF investing is that, regardless of market movements, you should always keep contributing to your CPF investment portfolio, always do RSP, and always do annual rebalancing. And that at the end of the day, it's timing the market over timing the market, right? Don't chase fads, don't chase just because of growth or value or anything like that, or chase any short-term trends that you are seeing. For example, Bitcoin or whatever, but thankfully we don't have such investments that's approved by CPF, or that you actually make knee-jerk reactions, such as right now, where you think that COVID-19 is just going to wipe out entire industries, and that you are just going to sell everything. That's not the key part about. That's not how you actually build wealth. I think when it comes to CPF. Sorry. Right. So when it comes to asset allocation, right, we notice that actually for CPF investments, there's not a lot of choices when it comes to bonds, and therefore we're just going to really talk about just all equity for right now. And that if like you can, for CPF investments, because like the rules, they require bond funds to be investment grade, to be highly rated, and that a lot of it is actually biased towards your Singapore bonds or your US treasuries or mortgage related type of securities. So we're not really going to talk much about that, but we are going to just talk about equities, right? So I think at this point, bonds, they have a role in your portfolio for portfolio stabilization, but they're actually quite expensive if you think about it, right? Yields are so low, and that with the most recent Fed rate cut, I think the 10-year yields about less than 1%. So as you can see, from a P perspective, right, I think your bonds is about twice or 2 to 3 times more expensive than your equities at this point in time, right? And I think if you want to have like a balanced portfolio, you can actually use your CPF, OA, or SA account as your bond portfolio, and anything else you can actually use it as your equity portfolio. For example, you want to go 50% into equity, so you take 50% of your monthly CPF contribution, or 50% of your CPF account to invest in the market. Or you can actually still go to bonds, because at the end of the day, we are in a low rate environment, and these bonds can actually help to provide. They still have a role to play in your CPF portfolio. And when it comes to asset allocation, we advocate a GDP weighted approach, because we believe that investments should be forward-looking and not market cap approach, which is actually favoring all those economies or companies that are actually the biggest right now. So with a GDP weighted approach, I think it's more relevant in terms of projecting which are the biggest companies going to be in the future, and that you are actually appropriately allocated towards these regions. So yeah, so this is just how you can get started. I'm not really going to go through much about it. These are quite you can go through. You can get all these information on our microsite. So I think at this point, I'm just going to look through the Q&A to see if there's any relevant questions to what I've presented earlier. Yeah, so for I think when Louis asked the question about CPF investment, does it include SRS? I think for SRS, it does not include, because I think it's considered as cash. So while there may be some overlaps between SRS and CPF enabled funds, but they are not quite the same. Yeah. So I'm just going to look through other questions. So Sastra AK4 asks, what's the best exit strategy for investments? So he's asking if it's for the long term, when should I withdraw the money? And I think at the end of the day, it really depends on your what your financial goals are, what and how long you actually project yourself going into or achieving those goals. So I think we need to take into account your investment risk profile, how many years you have left, when you intend to retire, and these will actually influence the type of risk that you're taking, and that uh, I will actually go through some of the tools later on that our microsite actually provides that actually gives you a better idea or greater clarity with regards to that. And actually, there's no real answer as to when you should exit your strategy. You should exit your strategy based on your financial plan and not based on what the market is. So for Roger Cole, he actually mentioned he's asking the question as to why annualized return for equity markets is lower than bonds and balanced portfolios. So I think because the on the table it actually does monthly RSPs into various into the various asset classes, right? So for equities, it's monthly RSP to equities, bonds monthly RSP into bonds, and balanced portfolio is monthly RSP into 60% bonds and 60% equities and 40% bonds. So it's a little bit because of the timing issues, and also secondly, I think for equities because they actually achieve greater drawdowns, and this actually impacts on how much returns that they need to actually break even. So for example, if you have a drawdown of 10%, you actually need about like a return of about 15 to 18% just to break even. So it's because of all these dynamics that actually leads to equities actually having a lower return profile than your bond or your balanced portfolio. So now the reason why bonds have done so well in this period is because we have actually been in a secular bull market for about 40 years. If you look at the grand scheme of things, right? So interest rates, I think, peaked at about in the late 70s, 80s, no, late 70s, early 80s. I think your interest rates have been going down all these years. So the thing about interest rates and returns is that when central bank cut rates, when interest rates go lower, your bond yields your bond yields will naturally follow the same trajectory, and bond yields with bond prices are actually inversely correlated. So when bond yields go down, your prices go up. So I think bonds have actually enjoyed this secular bull market for about 30 to 40 years now, and that's probably the reason why. Yeah. So for balanced portfolio, because they enjoy the benefits of bonds and equities, and I think from a risk-adjusted perspective, they have done the best. Yeah. So I think for the interest of time, I'm just going to go on with the presentation, and any unanswered questions later on at the end of the presentation, I'll try to go through them. Yeah, so just to give you an idea of why we came up with Set for CPF, which is our microsite, is because it really goes back to our mission statement of our company mission statement, which is help investors around the world invest globally and profitably. And we realized that actually there's a lot of money sitting in CPF that's actually not doing much. And it's just collecting that 2.5 interest rate, which is a very easy hurdle to beat. And we believe that if we want to actually help investors invest globally and profitably, right, we have to actually arm them with the right tools, knowledge, and this requires actually a dedicated platform to ensure that every one of you here will be able to achieve your retirement goals. So this is something. This is actually a platform for you to learn, for you to be engaged with your CPF investments, because we think that while we have a long-term plan to actually RSP according to our asset allocation, we still think that it's important for you to know what you're doing when it comes to investment. So the microsite, essentially, it will provide three things, tools, products, insights. So it will be a learning hub for you to learn things relevant to CPF, financial markets, helps you understand the basics of investing and financial planning. And secondly, I think it is also a gateway or rather a portal for fund updates, because we'll be partnering with all these fund houses to actually provide you with updates on whatever investments that you have, so that you know what you're doing. And that, I think thirdly, is also we aim to provide actually a gateway for investment ideas and strategies, so that that you are not just following the trend, but you are also learning, and that you're also improving as an investor as you go along with your own investing journey, and that hopefully you'll be able to prepare your portfolios better for what's ahead. So I'll be going through with some of the tools that the microsite has and how you actually make the best out of it. Right now, this is our main page that you can actually access from our from the FSMOne website right now, where you could click on funds, and that you will see a CPF microsite that's tagged new. You click that and you will come on to this main page. So some of the tools that's actually available on this website is, for example, your retirement calculator. Like I mentioned, when you want to exit your portfolios, what sort of risk that you want to take, what sort of investment returns that you like. Actually, first of all, you need to understand yourself first. So you need to know how much you need to end up with, how much you need to retire, what your lifestyle is going to be, and you need a retirement calculator. And that is the first step, right? And that, I think, generally speaking, for most people, they should have a pretty long investment horizon, and that when it comes to rate of return, they should try to be more conservative, because we want to under promise ourselves, so that when like if things do better, then that's good, but we don't want to be shortchanged. We don't want to shortchange ourselves at this point in time. So I think for investors, any long-term rate of return about between 4 to 6% should be quite realistic, based on long-term inflation targets about 2 to 4%. Let's just make an assumption, even though we are in a very low interest rate environment right now, but we have to assume that things will get better, and that the global economy will make a progress, right? So some of the tools that we have is also a starter kit. It basically gives you a head start as to how you can actually construct your portfolio. And a starter kit is basically an all equity portfolio. So it like I shown earlier in the slide earlier. So it's basically an asset allocation tool. So it allows you to create your own portfolio based on this. As you can see on the picture over here, we actually have laid out the allocation weights over here for you, but you can actually change it as and how you like it to be. This is just like a recommendation. It's like a baby step to you as to how you want to plan for your own thing. So as you change the allocation, as you click on the various funds that you want to invest in, it will tell you how much minimum investment that you require, and that how much you need to invest lump sum or RSP given this particular portfolio that you have. So at the end of the day, we provide this framework for you is because we investing your CPF money, it's a long game, right? You are in for the long haul, and that when you're in for the long haul, you need to ensure that you're globally diversified, so that you don't actually over concentrate into one particular region, where, for example, Latin America, where you see a minus 50%, minus 60% drawdown, and it will take you about 100. It will take you it require you to have an investment return about 180% just to break even. So we don't want that. So we're going to ensure that you're globally diversified. So if you see any drawdown, at least it's controllable and it can be mitigated. So of course, I think sometimes when you construct the asset allocation portfolio, you realize that, oh, my minimum investment amount is quite high. We also have global equity funds that you can actually just invest in, and they are just as good for people just starting out. So we have the for the global equity funds, I personally like the 3 funds from UOB, Nectasis, and Allianz. Right, the United Global Quality Growth Fund is a growth-centric fund, and this strategies is actually managed by Wellington. So Wellington, if you are not familiar with, they actually only manage institutional mandates. So some of their clients include GIC, Temasek, and this is the kind of access that working with partners like UOB will allow you to get access to such institutional strategies. And for Nexus and Allianz, they have slightly different investment styles compared to UOB. For Nexus Harris, it's more value oriented, whereas for Allianz, they actually don't really have much of a particular focus, and they so this actually these three funds actually provide different styles for investors according if they are growth centric, value centric, or they don't really have a view on that. So for our microsite, we're actually working with quite a number of fund houses that is actually very supportive of this platform, that will actually that are willing to work with us to ensure that investors will be able to get the best education when it comes to CPF investing. So on our platform, we have about 58 different funds. So 41 equities, 11 fixed income, 4 balance, and 2 funds that are we consider as alternative investments. And as you go through the website, you'll notice that there's actually a landing page for each of the fund house to introduce to you who they are, what they do, and what their history is. So this is just for you to get familiar with who these people are, and we think they are actually very reliable partners, and therefore have decided to work with them. So over here, for the Nico screen, for example, if you want, at the bottom is the list of CPF funds that is on board on our platform, and you actually click on it, and you will see a lot of information. You can get to know what the AUM is, what the expense ratio is, and also the fund fact sheets. So just for you to get familiar with what they're doing, if you want. Yep. So I think at this point, for our website, we also have a chart center for you to play around with. And I think this is actually quite interesting for you to compare funds. And I think at the end of the day, like what I mentioned in this slide, is that diversification is probably one of the most important things, as you can see from this chart and the next slide, which is this is the 3-year chart, and this is the 10-year chart. So as you can see, all these, like I selected all these funds of various asset class and various regions, and as you can see, they have very different return profiles. So this is why I think it's quite important to stay diversified, because while some areas might underperform, it will probably be offset by other areas which may outperform. And then at the end of the year, you do an annual rebalancing. You take the profits from the underperforming ones, from the overperforming ones, the outperforming ones, and you put it in the underperforming ones. It's because things don't underperform for very, very long periods of time. The things like markets tend to mean revert. So the idea is to actually recycle all the profits from the better performing ones into the worst performing ones. And diversification will allow you to do that, to do annual rebalancing effectively. So insights, we tend to have a wealth of content for investors right now. We are only just getting started. We will be rolling out more fun updates, more fun articles from our team, as well as the fund house partners that we're working with, and also some education content that's related to your investing 101s, some of your retirement or CPF insights, updates, some of our own investment and asset allocation ideas that we have for you, and hopefully this, as the content grows, your knowledge grows, and that you end up not just growing wealthier, but also a better investor over time. So I think just to preempt any questions about what set for CPF is, number one, we are not a managed portfolio solution, so we do not collect a fee from you in terms of any managed portfolio fee. We also do not charge any platform fees for CPF investments, and that we are not a digital advisor. So at the end of the day, we are just an investment platform for you to invest with, and for you to learn more about CPF investing. So I think one of the key reasons why you should invest your CPF investment through us, and hopefully not through our competitors, is that because we have an investment administrator status. So what this means that actually there's a lesser lag time in terms of of executing your buy orders, because we are working directly with the fund houses and the Asian banks. Whereas if you went through like another distributor, first you have to go through the fund house has to go through the CPF Asian bank, and they go through the fund house again and back to you. And I think another key reason is that we are actually cheaper to invest with, because I think if you are not familiar with, but any buy transaction that you make with your CPF investment, you actually have to pay a fee to your Asian bank, right? For every 250, for every 1,000 units of any fund that you invest in, you have to pay 250. Whereas through us, you pay a flat 250 regardless of how many units you buy. And as you accumulate more units, right, this fee actually will accumulate over time, and it could lead to quite considerable amount of savings for yourselves. So I'll just give it back to Sarah.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for this webinar. Just take note that also for the upcoming months, we'll be running a few webinars for some of our fund house partners that Sean mentioned earlier. So do stay tuned for that. We will have the partners come in to really share more in depth about the various funds that we are featuring on our microsite, and this will give you a more deeper understanding of what you're investing into or what you are looking into investing into in the future. So with that, we'll end the webinar. Thank you for joining us.